Hello everyone, and thank you so much, Damian, for the introduction. My Spanish is very poor, so I kind of guessed that it was a very nice introduction, so thank you. So when I spoke to Damian about doing this talk, we were talking about whether I should talk about financing and how we finance transmedia or cross-platform projects. And I decided that I didn't want to do a talk about financing because I think still when it comes to actually investing in innovation, we're still really early. And Damian was talking about the market we run at Power to the Pixel. And we do try to bring together the financiers who are looking into innovation and have set up small funds to do this. But still, we're very much siloed in individual media industries, and people are still really financing traditional television or film or books or art projects, and it's very hard to find people who actually finance cross-platform projects. So I thought instead it'd be really good to approach this from another way and to look at how we make the ideas that we're trying to develop investable. So my talk today is called Building a Prototyping Culture. And I want to talk a bit about how we have to develop media ideas today and how we need to really start thinking about our audiences much earlier on in the development process. So Adam started today by talking about you really have to understand the experiences that you're trying to create for people. And then Paula then talked about how we have to really approach media from a product design perspective. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how we have to think about how we grow ideas and how we grow media brands organically. So just a bit about me. My background actually is from the independent film world. It's not from the interactive or digital world. I worked with a company called Next Wave Films, which was part of the independent film channel in the States. I ran the UK office. And we financed films, independent films, by very talented first-time and second-time directors such as Christopher Nolan and Joe Carnahan. We did 13 different features, and we also sold the films. And I became incredibly frustrated about how long it took to develop, produce, finance, sell a film, and then getting it to audiences often took even longer. And when I started to see how the internet changed the way that we would engage with audiences, I decided to do something else and to look at how interactivity and digital was going to change the way we engage with people. And that's why I set up Power to the Pixel. So the company was set up in 2007 to help film and media companies adapt to digital change and changing audiences. So now we do two things mainly, and this is just a very brief overview of the company, but we run development labs where we help filmmakers, TV producers, creators, all kinds of storytellers develop ideas, develop projects for audiences, whatever platform they're on. So we like to call ourselves platform agnostic, so we don't really care what kind of media format that you're working in. We try to approach things in exactly the same way. And we work with people from right around the world to develop labs. And we also help broker relationships between different types of financiers, producers, and talent from right across the different media industries. So our experience is through our two main programs that we run. The first one is called the Pixel Lab, which is our main annual development program that we run from July to October. And we take around 32 different media professionals through a very intensive development process. We choose 16 producers of projects, and they work collaboratively. We try to mix people up from across different media industries. And it was like in the last session, they were talking about collaboration and how important it is to really sort of work across sector. And across different skills now, we're working with technology, with design, with storytelling in all kinds of new ways. So our second big program is a program that Damian mentioned, which is Power to the Pixel, the Cross Media Forum, which we've run. We're going to be in our 9th year in October. The event happens over 4 days, so it's a conference, a think tank where we bring together financiers and potential financiers of innovation in a space. So about 40 people come together to brainstorm new ways to support work. And then the center of the event is the Pixel Market, which is the largest dedicated market for cross-platform projects of all different types of genres from around the world. And these are some of the companies that come. So you'll see they're right across film, television, arts, publishing, advertising, tech, games. And we're really trying to bring together those people who are supporting innovation in their industries and companies. So this year we're doing a Latin American focus, and we're delighted to be working with partners from across different countries. And to thank Damien, Mediamorfosis, and Inca, and the British Council, who've been really instrumental at getting this focus together. And we have actually seven producers who are going to be attending as part of the Argentinian delegation. 2 of them we're going to announce tomorrow after we've chosen the prize. And the 5 others were announced later with the rest of the Latin American delegation. So going back to the subject of my talk, is about project development. How do we develop ideas today now that everything is disrupted and everything is changing? So before, the way that media industry business models were defined within their industry silos of music, film, television, publishing, and more recently games. But now digital's really blurred these boundaries, and all of these media industries are sort of obsessed with finding the next business model. And now digital has blurred all these business models. What does that mean? So we know that stories no longer exist in one single media format or platform. So users and audiences are moving effortlessly between one platform and device to the next, and they want their content to do the same. Stories have become living entities that are shared, discussed, and remixed in all these different places and spaces. And we've moved from a model of scarcity to one of abundance. So before, there were very few platforms, very few channels. There are a few gatekeepers who finance content. There are running times and release windows. And now we've moved from that model of scarcity to one of abundance, where there are more stories, more storytellers, and more ways to tell stories than ever before. And that means that, we've seen a slide before from Adam, so I just wanted to share it again, that the price of content has dropped, but the value of attention, of finding people's attention, of finding your audience, has risen. And that means we have to totally change the way we develop products today, media products. As Paola was talking before, she showed that diagram where the way we developed products before was a kind of linear approach, where we chose the platform first. So either a film distribution format, a television format that we choose first, and then we think about the audience right at the end. Well, now I think you have to go the other way. You have to think about people first, and then your platform second. And you can't keep sort of audience engagement till the end of the production phase, which is something that in the creative industries we tend to do. We tend to spend ages developing something and then handing it over to marketeers to find an audience for. But despite all these changes, project development has stayed really pretty much the same. I just wanted to underline this, that we usually start with one format, film, television, whatever the format is. So that's the goal. We aim to make that one distribution format. And then we spend a long time developing that product in a totally closed business-to-business vacuum. And it's not until we reach the point of distribution, if we're lucky enough to get distribution, that we ever think about an audience engagement plan, or we even think about our audience. It's very few people who are making decisions along that whole route. And when I was in an independent film world, that would often take around 5 years if you were lucky. That's from concept to point of sale. And when you think what happens in 5 years in the media world, it's kind of insane to think that you're working in a vacuum. And I can say that most projects are still developed that way today. So at Power to the Pixel, we've been developing our labs. We've been running our labs for now 7 years, and we've been running the market for the same amount of time. And what we found is we've met loads of different companies and producers and television, film companies, publishing companies who are developing cross-platform ideas. But a lot of the time, we find that they're using that same model, that the traditional approach, when they're developing these kind of ideas, where there's still one dominant media form. So the film or television project that is the most important form. And all the other things that are interactive or web or game tend to be seen as secondary or just as marketing. And that means that they're often underfinanced. The money to produce them often comes from the marketing budget or a tiny, tiny innovation budget. They're usually done in the last minute when you're in the post-production phase of your film or television project. And they often fail because of that, because of the way they're not integrated into the original concept and project development. And a lot of people are saying, cross-platform approaches, transmedia, cross-media doesn't work. And I would say that it's more that the approach of developing projects and of developing these projects isn't really thought through. And people are really developing cross-platform projects because they think they should, because all these new platforms are there. And at the Pixel Lab, we're trying to take another approach, where we're trying to really go back to the core of what the idea is. Really think about what you're trying to say, who you're trying to communicate with, and then choose an engagement strategy for that and the right product to develop first. Instead of doing everything and doing this checklist of cross-media products. So often that diagram, unfortunately, turns into this. And I have nothing wrong with these. I think the thing is, I think about these kind of transmedia, huge infographics, and I know you can't see this very clearly, but they're basically showing all the possible media platforms that you could tell your story on. And a lot of the time we see producers, when they're in the development stage, showing these kind of diagrams for their projects. And it's the thing that really puts off investors, because we know that it's hard enough to actually produce one single product. When you present that to investors, they're just going to switch off, because they're kind of usually interested in one part of it. And we're trying to kind of strip back now. Often people think if you're working in cross-platform or transmedia, it actually means you're interested in developing as many platforms as possible. We're trying to go the other way, where you actually think intelligently about how you grow your brand and where you start. So it's what Adam was saying at the beginning. You really have to understand the motivations and behaviors of the people that you're trying to communicate with, and then sort of understand how you develop and how you develop something out. So could project development look something like this, where you start much earlier on trying to engage your audience? You go right back to the core themes of what you're trying to say, you build an engagement plan, and you choose the first minimum viable product, or the first element that you're going to produce, and you test it really early on with your audience. And you use the results of that testing as a proof of concept, or you use the data that you're collecting to iterate or to develop the project further, or to get data from your audience that you then can take to investors to try and develop and to get more financing for what you make, or to make other products. And I suggest that you do this as fast as possible. When we looked at that kind of 5-year cycle, you can spend ages raising money for something that's incredibly expensive that fails on the opening weekend. It comes out, and then it's taken away, and no one sees it again. And now we have the tools to do this really effectively. So it's about thinking about organic and strategic brand development. And I wanted to show you a few case studies of projects that have been either showcased or in our market or in our lab at Power to the Pixel, as examples of how different genres are sort of grappling with this concept and trying to find ways that they grow things gradually and with their audience, so they understand their user base and their audience base. Now, some of these examples, I know you know, and they're quite old, but I just wanted to show them again, because in the context of this idea of prototyping ideas, because every single one of these ideas is something that's been around for a while. They're brands that exist maybe over 7 or 8 years. 3 of them are very independent. The last one's by a studio. And they've managed to keep alive by either user testing or researching what they're making with their audience or with their user group. They started from core themes, not with one single media product. They thought really about the theme of what they were developing and who for. They never spent very long until they showed the first product to audiences. And as I said, they've been around for quite a long while and they're still alive. So I think they're all interesting in their own right. So the first project I want to talk about is High Rise, which comes from the National Film Board of Canada Digital Studio. So how many people here know about this project? So actually, it's quite a few of you. Great. So High Rise is an experiment in documentary storytelling by a filmmaker called Katerina Chizek, who actually doesn't work in linear storytelling anymore. She only works in interactive after she completed this project. So High Rise, the core theme of High Rise is about living in high-rise buildings in cities right around the world, where most of the world's population live. So this diagram shows all these different circles and ovoids are actually all the different elements that she produced, all the different products that Kat produced for the project that all organically grew. Now, every single one of them was developed from around the theme that she was trying to explore in High Rises. She never chose an interface or a product. She always explored the theme with users. All of them were interactive in terms of the storytelling, and all of them were developed in collaboration with technologists and artists and designers and games designers, and also communities. They all were iterative, so she never had a process that she had decided she was going to use. They all were sort of R&D or research and development projects. So just running through all the different areas of the project, and I really advise you to explore this project on the National Film Board of Canada's site, because they design the most beautiful interactive projects, and their story studios have been around since 2007 or 2008, and they've got extensive experience of designing things very, very beautifully and telling stories in very new ways. So the first part of the project was called Out My Window, which looked at 13 different residents of tower blocks in 13 different cities around the world. And it's a beautiful interface that she spent a lot of time designing with a technology design company before they started thinking about the kind of way they were going to insert the stories. So the interface is really important. The stories are stitched together with photos and sound, and you take a 360-degree look of people's lives in their environment. She then went on to make an installation that was shown at ITFA, so the main documentary market and festival of the world, that then toured to different festivals. Sometimes it was with musicians, sometimes it was just in an exhibition space. And that was to try and create what you saw on the web in a kind of physical space. The next project she did was a local project in Toronto, which is her hometown, which is a community project that looked at the lives of, I think it was 6 different residents in a very dilapidated area of Toronto. And this project then developed into the 1 millionth tower, which is a project in partnership with Mozilla, who are the people behind the Firefox browser. And I find this story very moving because the actual project is about how these 6 different residents envisaged the regeneration of their very rundown area. And it actually came true. So this area has actually been developed because of this project. It's actually a 3D world that you can go in a web browser and see how they redesign the environment they're in, so you can explore it. And then looking at the partnerships, every single project is with a different type of partner. Some are not-for-profit, some are for-profit. And people came to CAT and to the National Film Board of Canada to propose different themes to work on in the project. The next part of the project was with the New York Times, and it's a short history of the High Rise. So it was the op-doc section of the paper that came to her to make some linear films around this topic. And Kat thought that this wasn't a particularly interesting exploration of the history of the high-rise, so suggested making some interactive pieces where they used the massive archive from the New York Times photo archive. And they're super beautiful, the results. So again, you can view this on the National Film Board of Canada's site or the New York Times. And this was actually the most successful part of the project because it was the first time they partnered with someone who had an extensive distribution reach. So talking about partnerships, I think newspapers are very interesting places for documentary filmmakers to go to find distribution routes for their films, where, as we know now with television, there are very few slots for documentary features now. There are some interesting partnerships now that you can build. So I'm just going to show a clip of that last piece.
Not so very long ago, though the city of New York was still young, from the land beside Central Park a new sort of building sprung. A montage of modern conveniences, the residential...
How did the publicly subsidized high-rise building go then, from solving the problems of the 20th century to being blamed?
East and West Europe were in competition to be seen to provide the best possible way for their citizens.
It's not hard to see that our world cities have mainly one way to grow, and that's vertically. For a century, high-rises were made of concrete and steel. Now urban jungles are made of glass, but what do they conceal?
So the last part of the project is called The Universe Within. That's just come out. And it explores the digital lives of people in tower blocks. And I think what's interesting about National Film Board of Canada is they've had the luxury of having a studio financed within their organization, and it's a public organization. So they have been able to iterate and research and to have a consistency in how they work. And I think it's quite difficult for independent producers generally to work in the innovation space because there is very little investment in it, especially if you're working on art pieces or documentary. So following their work is very interesting. And on our website, we've got quite a lot of case studies of talks they've done at Power to the Pixel, workshops that you can follow about the different projects and the lessons learned. So I'm going to move to something completely different and go to Finland. So I wanted to show this project, Iron Sky, because it's the perfect example of how you build an independent media franchise. So who's heard of Iron Sky? So just the speakers. So Iron Sky is a story, a science fiction fantasy comedy that's about the Nazis going to the dark side of the moon in 1945, and in 2018 they're coming back. So, so far, it's a feature film, came out in 2012, with a huge community engagement and different websites and tools that were developed around it before as they developed. There are 2 more films on the way. So there's a film that's in pre-production at the moment, and there'll be a 3rd one in a few years. And there are also various comic books, graphic novels, games, and other products that they've developed around the franchise. And what's interesting about this project is right from the beginning, they started engaging their audience. So the first film that was made, Iron Sky 1, it was created, developed, financed, and marketed by its audience. And they started in about 2007. And the first thing that they did was they threw out a very high-end teaser of the kind of style of film they wanted to make, that threw out the kind of core themes. They didn't even have a script at that point, but that was the thing that kick-started their community engagement. So usually you make a trailer and you show it just before you're about to release a movie. And now we're starting to see on crowdfunding sites that people are starting somewhere else. I mean, we saw in the last case there was a product that had already been developed that's looking for finance, but a lot of films and documentaries are being financed through crowdfunding. But Iron Sky, the director Timo, and the producer Tero started this before Kickstarter and Indiegogo had launched, and they set up their own site and crowdfunding service. So, along with the teaser, what they did was they developed a few interactive products that helped build their community. So I just wanted to show you a couple of them. So the first one was called, sorry, you can't see it very well, was called Wreck-A-Movie. So Timo's first film was an absolutely no-budget sci-fi comedy that he made a few years before, and he totally made it with his audience. So he had no budget, he was inexperienced as a filmmaker, and he managed to source effects, actors, everything from a community that he built. So he was kind of experienced in doing this. Now, Wreck-A-Movie is a tool that he built for him and for other filmmakers or media makers or storytellers to help research and for help the audience get involved in the actual script development, research on ideas, in fact, anything. And it's really funny if you look back at the kind of things that he asked. So sci-fi fantasy comedy that's shot on the moon, there are things like he would throw out to his community, what would a flag in low gravity look like if it was flying on the moon? And you get hundreds of comments back from people about what it should look like, designs and other things. And even when it came to production, and even though this was quite a well-financed movie, Iron Sky, it was about 7.3 million euros, there was a point during the shoot that their camera didn't work and they couldn't find another camera. It was in Germany where they were shooting. And literally one of their community came up with a very high camera in 24 hours. So he used this site for everything. Then another tool that I really love is called They Demand Iron Sky. So this enabled his fans to request to see the film in a cinema near them. So the red dots grow as more and more people send in their postcode or zip code and email address. And he used the whole Google Maps, so it was right around the world by the time this is the only picture I could find, but these dots became huge in certain countries. By the time it premiered in Berlin at the film festival in 2012, it had sold to every single territory. And for a film like this, it was really his first sort of proper finance film. That is totally unheard of. And it's because he had proved that there was value, that he had a community behind his film, and they wanted to see it. He's very transparent about the way he works. So his website, there's information about everything. And it's very genuine, the way he works with his community. So he shares all the financing details. So the film was made for 7.3 million euros. €1 million in the end was the amount he raised in crowdfunding. And this actually paid for the whole community management all the way through. There were numerous games and books that were developed around the film. And now he's on to his second film, Iron Sky, The Coming Race. And he's used a variety of methods to finance it and the coming projects. So he has around 200,000 Facebook fans. There are 30 million people who've seen YouTube videos. So he's always making videos about the different characters as well in the next movie. And he's now using Indiegogo to fund the pre-development of the movie. So he raised about 185,000 euros for the script, and he's raised about 600,000 euros for pre-development while he's trying to raise the 15 million out of traditional funding, because the original movie was actually an interesting mix of crowdfunding and a lot of soft money, so from the Finnish Film Fund, from Australia and Germany, and he's doing the same kind of combination. And what I really love about it is how and I wanted to show you his Indiegogo site, because if you look at the different perks, so the things that he's offering people for donations, he really understands his audience. So there are certain things that are sold out. So there's the usual. There's getting all the DVD or the electronic versions, going to the premiere of the film in Berlin. But the things that are sold out are really funny, and they're the parts in the movie where he's offered his fans to actually get extra parts. So Get Killed by a Dinosaur. Sorry, you can't see. Can you see this? Oh, do I need to move it across? And do you want to do it? Don't worry, I can just, it's not the end of the world. You just go to Indiegogo and I'll tell you. So the things that really sold out were, let me see if we go back. Is that going to go back to the other one now? Okay. Okay, great, thanks. So things that sold out were the parts he sold in Iron Sky 2. So if you want to get eaten by a dinosaur, that was $1,250. Getting eaten by a dinosaur in close-up was, I think, $1,750, and those sold out straight away. And then $5,000, I think, was getting killed. I can't remember now, I've forgotten because I haven't got it in front of me, but it's really funny if you look at it because they're kind of crazy things you would never expect. All the things that are $100 are kind of left. The $5,000 parts in the movie sold out. So, very effective way. He's kind of like pre-sold a lot of elements of the movie, but that's the way he's raised the money for the film. Now, the last thing I put was crowd investment. So they've also raised money where they've actually sold shares in the company that holds the film rights and the rights to all the different products in the Iron Sky franchise. And this is something we're seeing a lot more of now, because before, in the past, it was really hard to ask for private investment for any type of business or product that you're developing because of the regulations. It's really expensive. The legals are really expensive. And now there are automated systems that can do this, where as any type of investor, as a fan or an investor who wants to, someone who's a fan who wants to make money or to own a part of a project, it was quite complicated before. Now you can kind of buy a small amount of shares in a media product and actually own the equity, whereas in the crowdfunding, you were just donating in return for maybe a DVD or something like that. So they've raised 265,000 euros for, oh, sorry, let me go backwards. For the project, and I think this is going to be a very interesting way we see how products are actually financed in the future through combinations of crowdfunding and crowd investment. And the data that you can collect around your crowdfunding schemes, is really, really valuable for future investment. So now I think companies like Indiegogo are probably going to start having the two kind of models. And we're starting to see a lot of these companies develop in different countries in the world as the laws change, for example, in the US, and there are ways that you can automate financing and investing much more easily. So I wanted to just show you the trailer of the crowd investment trailer that they used for funding Iron Sky.
Mä teen leffaa ja tää pitää saada saataville.
Se mitä Iron Sky antoi mulle, mitä se merkkaa mulle, että se näytti sen, että mä pystyn tekemään tämän. Mä pystyn kertomaan näitä tarinoita tässä formaatissa, mikä on elokuvan tekoformaatti. Ja mä haluan tehdä sitä lisää.
Me tehdään tätä yleisön kanssa yhdessä. Yleisöllä pitää olla se valta päättää, miten kuluttaa. Et sitä kohti mennään.
The world is sick, and we are the doctors.
Mistä elokuvan teossa on kysymys, niin se on itse asiassa myymistä koko homma, elokuvaohjaajan duuni. Sun pitää myydä sun ajatus, se mitä sä haluat tehdä.
Mulla on erittäin hyvä keissi nyt Iron Sky, just tämän tekotavan takia.
Sä et pakota, sä et tuputa, sä et tunge kurkusta alas, vaan sä perustelet
so these are clips from the
ja
first
kerrot
movie.
mitä sä haluat ja sä innostat sen ihmisen itse tekemään, ei pelkästään sen mitä sä pyydät siltä, vaan 150% suorituksen.
Shit, this just keeps getting better and better.
Se isoin asia on niinku se levitys, että millä tavalla Iron Sky 2 tulee ulos. Se pitää saada saataville. Sanotaan näin, että jos jengillä ei ole mahdollisuus maksaa siitä, niin sitten ne ottaa sen ilmoitteeksi. Tämän yhteisön kanssa meillä on niin paljon poweria, että me pystytään niinku määrittelemään tämän leffan suhteen pelisäännöt, että miten se tulee ulos. Iron Sky Universe tekee elokuvia, TV-sarjoja, pelejä. Sä voit ostaa osakkeita. Susta tulee Aerosky-firman osakkeenomistaja ja sä pystyt vaikuttamaan niihin asioihin, mitä me tehdään siellä. Ja sä pystyt lähtemään siihen niin kuin suhteellisen pienellä pääomalla.
Brilliant.
So they worked with a Finnish company, Investor, to do this. But you'll see that all those different comments that the producer and director made are all about working with your audience and letting your audience decide. Now, that doesn't mean that the audience have decided, everything to do with how the script's written, what goes into the film, but they always consult with their audience. Timo's very much the director and writer. He writes the script, but he works with his audience. And the idea this time is to try and distribute the film with the audience as well, because what happened is when they actually, because they pre-sold the film to territorial distributors around the world in different countries, the problem was they had no control over that final part of distribution. And so it went very much against what their fan community wanted to do, which was see it when they wanted to see it, and they had to wait. So there were loads of problems in different territories. So this time they hoped to raise the money to actually distribute the film themselves as well. So the next project I'm showing is called Everyday Rebellion, which is a documentary project that came through our Pixel Lab in 2011. And it's a story that was told by two brothers called Arman and Arash Riahi, who are Iranian and escaped with their parents when they were children from the Iranian Revolution. And they were very inspired by the uprisings and the Arab Spring movements in the Middle East, and by the Occupy movement around the world, and by Femen in Ukraine, and many other protest movements that started really sort of rising around that time. And their initial idea was to make a film, and also to have some kind of archive of different YouTube videos that started disappearing worryingly from the site. So the idea was to collect methods of non-violent protest and civil disobedience. And instead of doing this kind of film and an archive, we worked on the project on the Pixel Lab and sort of got them to think in three different parts, really, for the project. And the project grew very organically from the moment they left the lab and they put up the online platform. So there's a cinema documentary which tells the stories of the activists with a lot of user-generated materials and also produced materials from the filmmaker. It's a combination. The online platform helped them gather a lot of the materials as they were developing the film, and it has other elements to it which are really useful in the development of the project. And they also made an app which helps activists and creative protest. So the film went to many festivals. It's been distributed to 22 different countries. The traction for the film, for the project, really grew because of the site and because of the engagement with the different protest movements around the world. And it's been shown in many different countries and self-translated by various activist movements in Turkey, in Syria, in China, in Hong Kong. I should say China and Hong Kong during the protests. And the site was started in a really rudimentary way after the lab, and it grew and became a lot more sophisticated. And it's a great destination now on everything to do with non-violent protest. So there's a mixture of user-generated content that they collected from activists, and also different content that they produced for different people. So they did 2 series for Arte, which is a French-German channel. One series was about creative resistance, which I think you can still see on the site. And the next was a 10-part monthly series around the stories of different peaceful activists. So a lot of these videos have been in collaboration with the different protest movements and have been translated into many different languages. So the last part of the project that they developed so far was this app, which supports protest and street art. And there are sort of tips and tricks for activists to work with. And they're continually looking for money for the project. It's a project that has a continuous lifespan. So unlike a film that's finished and sort of comes out and is distributed, I think there's a great opportunity now for documentarians who are working in the social impact space, who really want to create impact and change, to work with these tools, which enable them to keep their messages and communications alive over many different years. And often I think when you look at, even though I love watching documentary features, I was recently on the jury for a big human rights festival in Prague. And I looked at some of the films which show incredibly important stories of people going through tremendous suffering throughout the world, or subjects that are incredibly important that have taken 10 or 15 years to make. And I feel really sorry that those films will probably just be seen at film festivals and very few times on slots on television at 1 a.m. And I think now we have to really think about the tools and the way that we communicate things that we want to communicate. And at the beginning of my talk, I talked about not choosing a distribution format or a platform first. It's about really thinking about what you want to do and the message you want to communicate. And sometimes you have to start from a blank slate and look at all, think in a platform agnostic way, and particularly in this area, we're starting to see filmmakers no longer just calling themselves filmmakers, like Katerina Chizek from the High Rise Project. They're documentarians. They never use the word filmmaker anymore because they're trying to communicate an idea, not just make a film. So the last project I wanted to talk about was from Disney. And the reason I wanted to show this was these projects are not just the domain of independent media makers. People have started to organically develop brands and projects in bigger places like studios. So this project's called Where's My Water? And it was developed out of a mobile production unit that Disney owned called Creature Feep, which is based in San Francisco. So the company were experimenting with the iPad and touch control, and they developed this game mechanic which actually allowed you to shoot water around through bits of dirt. So that's what the brown bits are. And because Disney is a character-driven company, Disney decided that they wanted to develop a character to go with this game mechanic. So they developed a character that was a swamp alligator who lives in a sewer and hates dirt and always wants to be clean. So he's called Swampy. Now this went on to become a game called Where's My Water, which was incredibly successful and basically toppled Angry Birds from the top of the App Store, where it had been for many, many weeks and maybe months. What was interesting about this project is this side of Disney is very much about sort of brand extension when they make games around their animations. This game actually infiltrated the other way around into the Disney universe. And now you can find toys of Swampy in Disney stores. You can meet Swampy character in Disney cruises. And now there are animated series of Swampy on YouTube that have been seen by millions of viewers. So I wanted to use this example about this idea of incubating a brand. So this started as a game mechanic, and then they developed a character and narrative around it. Why can't we start with the character and narrative and develop a game mechanic around that? So when we think about the cost of producing a Disney animation or making a pilot for Disney, it's incredibly expensive. Where the game actually costs a low six-figure dollar, so the low sort of $100,000, $200,000 to make. It's much cheaper sort of developing a brand through this way than through making something that costs a lot of money and many years to develop with no sort of user testing. So when you think of, people often say, yeah, but you can't do this for all these different types of genres. But when you think about it, fantasy, detective, horror, sci-fi, thriller, soap, historic melodrama, which are some of the main genres that you see in fiction, they all have sort of overlapping demographics with gamers, and they all have game mechanics that go with these genres. So is this something that we should start thinking about? Using interactive approaches, making different types of formats that we can develop much faster and for much less money, and sort of testing them much earlier on with our audiences to see if they have traction and to see if this is something we should develop further. And this is something we're trying to get our media producers to to really explore when they come to the lab is how, instead of working in that crazy time span of years, 5-7 years, to build these, even for a film project, but when you start building something that has many different platforms, you can't sort of like hold everything back for years because things are moving so fast. People will not invest in multiple platform IP. They want to invest in one thing, and now they want to see that you have some kind of idea of your audience and who the user base is. So it's something I really recommend to start thinking about. Something that the tech industry does the whole time, which is this idea of prototyping and making sort of alpha and beta versions of ideas and testing them out to see if they work with users and audiences. So thank you very much, and I'm going to be here until the end of tomorrow. So please come and talk to me about anything.